I guess we'll get started since we're late. It's not as much time for dilly dallying as I'd prefer. Um, okay, so I hate how far back this is. This is strangeness. Camera's already set up, so we'll fit here. Um, we're gonna go through 3 stories this morning before we transition to biblical accounts. Uh, I'm pretty confident we're familiar with. Yeah, these are all like fables, children's stories, so we should be pretty familiar with them. We'll start with the earliest and the simplest one. Are we familiar with the story of the ant and the grasshopper? Maybe this is an Aesop fable. Does anyone feel like? First of all, who's familiar with this story? Man, okay, I was being presumptuous apparently. I won't make either of y'all tell us the story. So, do I have? I have a printed version. I'll read it. This one's really short. Um, I think this is how it's recorded for Aesop, but there are other versions of it. So one bright day in late autumn, a family of ants were bustling about in the warm sunshine, drying out the grain they had stored up during the summer when a starving grasshopper, this is not Aesop, because his fiddle under his arm, came up and humbly begged for a bite to eat. What? Cried the ants in surprise. Haven't you stored anything away for the winter? What in the world were you doing all last summer? I didn't have time to store up any food, whined the grasshopper. I was so busy making music that before I knew it, the summer was gone. The ants shrugged their shoulders in disgust. Making music, were you? They cried. Very well, now dance. And they turned their backs on the grasshopper and went on with their work. There are other versions of the story, but it's the same general idea of there are ants who work diligently during the summer, storing up food, and the grasshopper just plays. I've seen, yeah, other ones where he just wants to dance all throughout the summer instead of working. And then when the winter comes, the grasshopper does not make food. Presumably, the grasshopper dies in the cold. Who's to say? I'm sure there are other like nicer versions of the story where the ants let the grasshopper come in out of the cold and eat their food. Okay, does this sound vaguely familiar? We've heard a story like this. All right. Yeah. Before we move on to the other two, what are what are some of the themes? What do you think? What's the point of telling a story like this? In fact, I think it was this one that had a moral at the end of the story that I cut off. What do you think the moral of a story like this is? Work if you can work. What's the qualifier there at the end? If you can work. Yeah. Um, I'm curious if you think. So if this is an Aesop fable, uh, some variation of this, if it's fairly old, I don't know. I'm just. I think it's interesting the qualifier that I think I would agree with. I'm wondering if ancient folks would have that same qualifier. I'd probably just say to everyone, work without the qualifier there at the end. What else? Do y'all think?
I think there's something about not waiting until you need food to work for it. But they work all summer to be prepared for winter, and the grasshopper would have wanted to come in at winter and actually instead of planning ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So in addition to just like working hard, there's also an idea of like preparedness, of um, maybe being diligent and using your time wisely. Yeah. Other stuff in the story. This one's pretty simple, so I don't want to belabor it too much. I don't think there are tremendous depths to be mined in this table. Okay. we'll move on to our second one, which I'm confident that all of you are familiar with, which is the Three Little Pigs. Just be sure, raise your hand. Heard the Three Little Pigs? Okay, all right. There was one hand that I didn't see go up, so we'll excuse that. I'll assume that you've heard it at some point. Who wants to, someone besides me, tell us the story of the Three Little Pigs? Who feels confident, brave enough? Go ahead.
Okay, so there's three pigs that are and a wolf, and they're
And the wolf.
scared, and so they set about to make their homes wherever they settle. And one makes his house out of straw because it's quick and he wants to have fun or something. And then the second one makes it out of sticks because that's what it is, I guess. And, I don't know. And then the last one makes it out of bricks because he can take his time and make a good house. And then the wolf comes along and tries to get the first pig and then blows his house over because it's straw. And then he comes and knocks on the second one and blows his house over because it's just sticks. And then the third one he tries to get and he can't get too big.
Okay, does that sound right to everyone? Excellent, well done. I think that was.
There's a lot of kind of stuff in it.
Oh yes, that's fair. You left out the two most important lines. I'll huff and I'll puff. I'll blow your house down. And what are the pigs' refrain? What do they say? Not by the hair. Yeah, that's really. I just wanted to hear someone say it. Okay. I not that this is that important, but I was looking at the history of the Three Little Pigs story. Apparently, earlier versions of this, it was a fox instead of a wolf, and it was three pixies instead of three pigs. So that's interesting. I thought. What ending have y'all heard for this story? I think there's a traditional ending that we didn't say, but it doesn't always have the same ending. What ending have y'all heard for the Three Little Pigs?
Is there one where the wolf tries to like go in?
Yes. Okay. I've seen that a couple places. When I was looking at it, it said that's how the story usually ends. The wolf tries to go down the chimney of the brick house, and they have like a cauldron there, and then they eat the wolf. I don't know. Another detail that, depending on how mature your audience is that the wolf eats the previous two brothers, the previous two pigs. Sometimes, though, you've probably seen it where the pig escapes by the hair of his chin, and then runs off to the next brother, and then they accumulate. End up all at the brick house at the end. Yeah. Oh, and there's one other variation. I had never seen this, but apparently this is a part of it. That for the final wolf, so the first two brothers have been eaten. And the wolf is trying to get into the brick house, can't get in, so he has to try and trick the pig. Has anyone heard this before? They remember this from the. Yes. I didn't recall this, and it was something like he would try to trick him to go out to the orchard and pick apples, try to go out to the fair. But part of the story, which I think is important, is he does go out to the orchard, he does go out to the fair, or wherever the wolf is trying to get him. Is that like in an old cartoon version of it? No, you said that, and that's like gave me a memory from 30 years ago. But the point I was going to make is that the pig always goes early. So the pig just arrives early, does whatever the pig needs to do, and then gets back before the wolf shows up. Which, I don't know, I think plays into the meaning of the story. Which is what? What do y'all think? We're all familiar with the Three Little Pigs. What's the point of the story? Why do we tell this story?
working hard on the front end so the safety.
Okay. So, working hard earlier will have, just because you don't get to immediately go and do the things you want to do. I think, yeah, there are versions of the story, how you were telling it, where the pigs that build the straw house and the stick house get to go play sooner than they wanted to.
Is it like wise man, foolish man, like that vibe too of like building a house on the sand or building on the rock, like just being smarter and more diligent, like still
Yeah.
when you build your house, how you build it.
Yeah, and it has, yeah, it's harder on the front end, consequences on the back end um, for the wise man and for the pigs. What else? Again, not the most profound story, so there's not maybe a whole lot to do here. The second part that is not normally told in the story, the part with the orchard and the fair and wherever else that the pig in the brick house goes. I think that clearly, if this is a part of the story, it is just a broad message of industry, working hard, waking up early. These are all things that we associate with one another. I'm curious, who here is like a night owl? Who likes to stay up late? Few of us. Just do whatever. Does that mean that you don't sleep, or that you sleep too much?
No, I can stay up late, or I can go to bed early, but
What's your normal habit?
I prefer to go to, well, I don't know, like same.
Okay, I'll just tell you this. Like, whenever I met Addie and her family for the first time, like, they were sitting down to eat dinner at like 8 o'clock. And that's like blew my mind. Because I came from a family where we ate dinner at like 5 o'clock. So they were 9 hours compared to our family.
Yeah, are you like from Spain or something?
My
Um,
dad would get home late, and he would get home late, and then we'd just stay up late talking and stuff, so. But I can also go to bed at like 8 too, so.
that does sound nice a lot of the time. I'm curious. So just a few of you raise your hand, night owls. I've heard it said that that being an early bird versus night owl, these are equivalent. These are equal things. Some people just happen to be one way. Some people happen to be the other way. This is not true. One of these is objectively better than the other one. As someone who stays up late, I wish in my heart of hearts that I woke up early. I was one of these people. Get things done in the morning, go exercise, read your Bible, whatever you want to do in the morning. Instead, I'm the sort of person who shows up 5 minutes late to the class that they're teaching. We associate waking up early with these are people who get things done, who work hard. We associate going to bed late with, well, I'll leave that to you, whatever you associate it with. Okay, last story. This is my favorite one. It's like a children's story that I think about frequently, which is the story of the little red hen. Do we know this story? Ty, do you not know the story?
No, like, I know the name of the story, but I can't remember it.
Does anyone want to take a stab at telling it, or should I read it? I'll read it. Okay. Once upon a time, a little red hen lived on a farm with a lazy dog, a sleepy cat, and a noisy duck. I see it with all sorts of other animals. Anyways, one day the little red hen found some grains of wheat on the ground. Who will help me plant this wheat? She asked. Not I, said the dog. Not I, said the cat. Not I, said the duck. Then I will do it myself, said the little red hen, and she did. The wheat grew tall and golden. When it was time to harvest it, she asked again, who will help me cut the wheat? Not I, said the dog. Not I, said the cat. Not I, said the duck. Then I will do it myself, said the little red hen, and she did. Next she asked, who will help me take the wheat to the mill to be ground into flour? Not I, said the dog. Not I, said the cat. Not I, said the duck. Then I will do it myself, said the little red hen, and she did. Finally, she baked the flour into a loaf of warm, delicious bread. Who will help me eat this bread? She asked. I will, said the dog. I will, said the cat. I will, said the duck. No, said the little red hen. You would not help me plant the wheat, harvest it, or grind the flour. I will eat it myself. And she did. How do we feel about that story? First of all, let's do a vote. We've had 3 stories: Ant the Grasshopper, 3 Little Pigs, and Little Red Hen. If your favorite story was The Ant and the Grasshopper, raise your hand. Because you're all boring. If your favorite story was 3 Little Pigs, raise your hand. If your favorite story was The Little Red Hen, raise your hand. What's your name? Helga? Which one did you vote for? This is really important. All right. That's all. Okay. So some of y'all are like me. You like the Little Red Hen. What do you like about the Little Red Hen story?
I like that you said no. Like, you want them? Just kidding. Like, no, you didn't help me out.
Yeah, that final bit of the story is the best. When she asked, "Who will help me eat this bread?" She knows the answer. Sorry, were you saying something?
No. It's probably sad, but like,
Who thinks this is acceptable behavior from the Little Red Hen?
I mean, my human influence is really
Hey, we'll talk about it. I don't know. Basically I don't know. This is silly. These 3 stories this week are the most like childish stories that we'll probably do. And but I think of these lines frequently. Not I. You did not help me do X, Y, and Z. Therefore, you can't help me do the final thing. Maybe I'm just a really spiteful person. That's why it comes to mind so often. Does this story seem to have the same basic message as our other 2? Working hard is important. Maybe there's more of an element here of like, not teamwork, but contributing to some sort of greater good, some overall good. Anything else that y'all think is like worth drawing out of the Little Red Hen story?
I think the delivery is like it's the same general message.
My delivery?
No,
Yes.
the delivery of the story of the message is equally important. One's like for safety and mission and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That kind of thing.
that's a good point. The other 2, this is you need to work hard or else you'll suffer the consequences. This is just the way of nature, the way of the world, that it's dangerous out there. You need to work hard to save up for winter or to not fall prey to literal predators. But with this one, the situation could very much be avoided. Or like the hen could just give them bread and they would all be fine. In fact, who wants to eat an entire loaf of bread on their own? She's really like suffering here to make the point that she wants to make to the dog, cat, and duck.
I don't know if this is like important or not, but like whenever she goes to the dog, cat, and duck, like are they together and they all say no together, or are they saying no individually? Is it this idea of like, okay, well I'm saying no because everyone else is saying no, or is it like individual no? I don't know if that's completely important or not, but
Yeah, I will say, you've thought about it more than I have. But also, I took this directly from like a children's book I found a PDF of, and in there it is different pages for each animal. So presumably they're all separate.
I think you underestimate how much some people have
It also, I feel like, depends on the bread. Like, if the Little Red Hen is making a loaf of Wonder Bread, I can eat a handful of slices there, but I don't know. There are better breads. You could eat like a loaf of sourdough. Is there butter involved? I think this is crucial. Yeah. Okay. moving on from these stories. I'm interested. I mean, I'll give you the word that I think it is, but is there a word that you think encapsulates the virtue or the theme of these three stories? Diligence. This is good. We did use that word earlier, so I guess that you get credit for that one. Collaboration, which is definitely a theme in the final one, in the Little Red Hen. What else? See if y'all can read my mind. Well, did we do generosity already? We're gonna do generosity at some point. Industry. That's the word that I had titled for this week. So, what are some biblical stories? This is our typical transition for this class. What are some biblical stories for that have these same themes, or that these stories remind you of? Ty's already mentioned one that seems very similar to the Three Little Pigs, which is the foolish man and the wise man. What else? The parable of the talents. Okay, we're going to spend some time with that one. Do you feel comfortable? Can you give us like a summary of the parable of the talent? That's fine. I don't know those specific numbers. I didn't write it down. Yeah. Yeah, so there's different amounts, and then the folks with the bigger amounts, so the person gives like 5 talents, we'll say. Is it like 10, 5, and 1? Is that what it is? Person with 10 goes out and invests it, and they at the end of the story, they bring it back to the king or whoever, and they've doubled their money. Am I getting this right? Someone can, yeah. And then the person with 5 does the same. The passage, if anyone cares, is Matthew 25, verse 14. And then but the person with 1 goes and buries it because they're worried about losing it. And then when they come back at the end, they just return the 1 talent, and they're reprimanded for this. What other stories? Okay. Yes. And is there anything in particular about Proverbs? Yes. Yeah. So the referencing an ant as a sign of industry is in Proverbs. Proverbs 6, verse 6. Let's read that. It talks about the sluggard. It's just a fun word. Okay. So Proverbs 6, verse 6. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Sorry, I was making the ant masculine earlier. It's very unbiblical of me. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. What a great line. And poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. The ant gets mentioned also at the end of Proverbs, but I think that's the one that most resembles the story of the grasshopper. So clearly, this is just like an ancient way of thinking about working hard. This example gets used frequently. Other stories that we think of?
Might be a stretch, but for the ant and the grasshopper and the Little Red Hen, I thought it was like people saying like Lord.
Yeah.
I never knew.
Yeah.
Ants could probably be used to help the grasshopper, and with him, trying to make a point to the other animals.
There was a time before where you were supposed to do something. You were supposed to, and in these cases, it was to do good in Jesus' name. And yet you didn't do that, and now you have to suffer the consequences. Other things that we think of? So I'm interested do you feel like, and this is our main question each week, do these traditional classic stories, children's stories, fables, do they parallel the biblical story? Do they match up with the Bible? The lessons that we're meant to get from the three little pigs, little red hen, and the grasshopper. Does that match up with what we see in Scripture? It's the best thing I've ever heard. Sorry. Hmm. Mhm. Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, um, there was a guy outside of the. I went to church in like inner city Fort Worth area. It's kind of a dangerous area. But anyways, there's a homeless guy who was walking by, asked for money, gave him money, and an elder at our church was nearby and said, "You shouldn't have done that. That this person, he comes by pretty often, and he doesn't actually need that money for food." And that was like traumatizing to hear. Yeah, so it is interesting. If there's any book that's about common sense, it's the book of Proverbs. And Proverbs, as we see, very much lines up with the similar story of the ant in Proverbs as we get in ancient culture. But you're thinking that maybe that's not the full story, that there's another way to be, something maybe more defined by generosity.
I found it interesting that Pro Right, the very first of Matthew 25, there was a conversion or their lamps and the oil, and like, the foolish ones come with just their lamps, and the wise actually brought extra oil with them, so then like, when it comes time, the foolish say, "Give us some of your oil for our lamps are going out," and the wise say, "Think still will not be enough for us and you go rather to the dealers and buy for yourself." I do feel like the little red hen of like, who's gonna get it? Well, not sorry, you didn't help me. No,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that one kind of matches up with this one a little bit. They actually like make them go out to buy me the oil, and while they're gone, like provide me. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it does kind of match up with a little bit of what we're saying.
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of overlap here. There's a lot of these stories about diligence, preparedness, industry. I don't have my phone because of technical difficulties. How much time do we have? I'm trying to think if I want to go into 35. What is? Oh, we have so much time. Okay. Does anyone know who Max Weber is? Does this name mean anything to anyone? He's a German sociologist from like the turn of the 19th, 20th century, from the 1800s to the 1900s. And he wrote a very famous work called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, which work he coins both the term and the idea of the Protestant work ethic. Is this a term that we've heard before? Protestant work ethic. We've heard people talk about this. What is the Protestant work ethic? You don't have to get it according to Weber, but mm-hmm.
Sometimes I've been in situations where I'm like, yeah, what's the physical twist that in a way to make you work with people who work for them.
Yeah.
It doesn't always feel genuine.
Okay. So already some skepticism about the Protestant work ethic. That this is something we're supposed to do, but can possibly be abused, particularly by people in power with other people working for them. Okay. What else? It was a deep breath, Robin. I wasn't sure.
Well, I think it's relevant that, especially in the New Testament stories, to talk about what they worked for. Um, I don't think Jesus is telling those stories to be like the grasshopper.
Mm-hmm.
Or his little red hen to say, yeah, make sure you work hard and get your bread, and then you don't have to share it with anybody. I mean, the principle is there, but he's talking about salvation
Mm-hmm.
and doing the kingdom work, not working at a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's relevant
Yeah.
in the Protestant work ethic as well. But I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't work hard at your job and all of that, but what are you working for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That. Certainly, there's a theme in Scripture of our secular work being important, something to work hard at, but more often than not, that's not what's being talked about. We're working toward something higher and greater. What else? What is the Protestant work ethic? How do we think about it from others? Say from others, there's only like 6 of y'all, so it's a lot of overlap. Do we, first of all, just like, when you hear that term, is that something that we have positive connotations with or negative connotations? That's really all I want to get at. If you think this is a good thing when you hear it, give a very timid hand raise when you hear it. If when you hear the Protestant work ethic, you're a little bit more cynical and have negative connotations. Okay. Slight majority for positive. Certainly, if y'all are anything like me growing up, this is something it's given to me with positive associations. This is something I should strive to have, is this Protestant work ethic. So what Weber, in his book, he makes a couple points, and this may, I'll present it neutrally, I'll try to, and this may give some different connotations for y'all. He argues that this is where capitalism comes from, is that capitalism emerges in Northern Europe in particular, Germany, France, and England, and North America, because this is a place where there's a lot of Protestants, and they have this particular Protestant work ethic. He describes it, I've slightly paraphrased it, that the Reformation, we get Protestants, profoundly affected the view of work in the world, dignifying even the most mundane professions as adding to the common good, and thus blessed by God, as much as any, that these are as much blessed by God as any sacred calling. So trying to emphasize, it's just as noble to be a cobbler or a carpenter as it is to be a priest or a monk. Which I think for most of us, we can get behind that. We have a special place for people who dedicate themselves to the service of the church. We think that's a great and noble thing. But we also think, yeah, there's something lovely and valuable about these other career paths, which I don't know what everyone does or is studying, but I don't think is anyone here a man or woman of the cloth? I don't think so. So hopefully this is something that we resonate with. And he says that work ethic gives rise to a society where there's entrepreneurship, and there's this assumption that other people are also working hard and are trying to be fair in their dealings. And so this gives rise to capitalism over time. He also suggests, and this might be tipping the hand a little bit, that this way of viewing the world leads to a general disenchantment with the world. Does anyone want to take a stab at what he means by that? That so we'll talk about something else in a second, but that seems almost certainly right. That everyone's just kind of the same, equal, like in a special way, but they're all equal in their striving toward the work of God. I hope that makes sense. Part of what Weber is trying to get at is Weber's not a great guy. Also, I'll just note that. So you can ignore whatever he says. But this point is interesting, which is in medieval and certainly classical and ancient ways of viewing the world before you get Protestantism and the Reformation. People viewed the world as enchanted. And sometimes this took on very literal enchantment, where there are like spirits in the world, pixies and foxes. That's a connection that's not worth making. But more so just that things are valuable in and of themselves. They have sacred significance given to them by God. And under Protestant worldview, things become sort of neutralized and secularized. And what's important is the individual and their work habits and their striving toward God and their relationship with God and then their work. But there's nothing significant and sacred about the world. So that's not super important for our purposes, but I just want to point out how he links these things together. Final thing I want to say before we wrap up is I want us to think about, and this connects to some of the other stories that were brought up, the laborers in the vineyard. This is very much a story about work, even though it has other significance that's maybe more spiritual. But the parable is a parable about people doing work. And at the end of the parable, after people have done different amounts of work, some have worked all day and some have only worked for an hour. And they're all paid the same at the end of the day. And this seems to be in direct contrast, tension with some of these other themes that we've talked about. So I think where this has to leave us, as we head down to worship, is the Bible very much has an idea of diligence, and working hard, and of being an industrious person. And that there are consequences in life when we are not those things. The scripture is inspired by the one who created the universe, the one who created a world in which there is summer and winter, and where if you don't store up food in the summer and the fall, then you will go hungry in winter. This all comes from the same source, which is God. And yet this is the same God who tries to give us a way of viewing the world that is a view of abundance, in which generosity is how we are meant to live, in which things aren't always fair and equalized, but rather where we pour out ourselves for one another. And somehow we have to keep both of those things together. All right, this was excellent. I'll hopefully see y'all next week.